Today, we are going to be talking about my experience as a black man being in a Russian family. They told me I would never fully be accepted. Russian people would not allow you into their family. Many times I was put in a situation where it's just like I had to force myself. I had to drag myself through many situations. Everybody, and welcome back to the channel. Afro Love, roaring truths to preserve your pretty voice. And today we are going to be talking about my experience as a black man being in a Russian family. To give you a background, I am a Zimbabwean man. My name is Andy, and I'm living in Moscow. And I am married to a Russian woman. So my new family is Russian. A lot of people are considering whether they should marry a Russian woman, or perhaps they're considering if they should date out of their race. And a lot of people ask me, how does it feel? Are you accepted? Are you treated the same? Is it okay? Do you feel safe being a black man in a predominantly white family or in a Russian family? In my experience, I feel like I have been pleasantly surprised because I have been treated the exact way as somebody that is a son-in-law should be treated. A lot of people kind of made me worry before I made the jump to Russia, before I moved here. They told me I would never fully be accepted. They told me that Russian people would not allow you into their family because you are black, you are African, you don't look like them. And I kind of had this weird whisper in the back of my head saying, oh man, what if they're right? Because I was pretty much going into the unknown. But thankfully, I was pleasantly surprised by the way that her family treats me in a way that is absolutely unbelievable. I moved here and I experienced firsthand what family means in Russia, regardless of what color your skin is and regardless of where you are from. My relationship with my wife's grandmother is an example of how loving and caring Russian people are, regardless of your race. During my time in China, I experienced a lot of suffering. I came into China as a very young man, at 17 years old, and many times I had to fend for myself. Many times I did not have food. Many times I was put in a situation where it's just like I had to force myself. I had to drag myself through many situations. But I prospered. And kindness for me was something that was limited because I was used to fending on my own. When I moved to Russia, after I went through all of this trauma, I met my wife's grandmother, who I also call my grandmother now. And she is probably somebody in my life that has changed my view of people in general. My wife and her family have changed my mindset altogether. And I'll tell you how. I used to believe that I need to fend for myself. I used to believe that I had to fight for what is mine and I didn't need any help. And I am on my own. When I moved here, her grandmother treated me like her son. She calls me son. She calls me Sinok. And that is wild to me because I have never really been close to my grandmother, any of my grandmothers. And she kind of gave me this feeling of being absolutely safe, being comfortable. And she was basically the grandmother that I never had. And it's kind of strange if you think of it, because I moved to a place that is not even my own, but you have somebody from a different country that is accepting me. And I finally have a relationship with a grandmother that I probably did not even know existed until I met my wife. And she is always in the kitchen, cooking up a storm. She's always trying to make me feel extremely comfortable. She is always trying to ensure that I'm safe. And she has this obsession of feeding me. which is just the typical thing that babushkas do. The common thing with grandmothers all over the world. They try to overfeed you. But the amount of care that she has for me has pretty much moved me. I remember when I was sick and she basically cried. It was gastritis and I was feeling terrible. I was not feeling good. And she cried because I couldn't eat. I couldn't eat normal food. Sometimes I couldn't eat at all. And I lost a lot of weight. And she cried. And keep in mind, I'm only a part of this family because of my wife. I met my wife, I fell in love, and they treat me as if I am a part of their unit. One of their own was hurt, regardless of the color of my skin, regardless of where I'm from, regardless of what I have done or what I've been through. I'm basically family. So that's something which I found quite interesting because it was more of like I have and I am a part of a unit where people care about each other. For me, I have basically come from a background where it was sort of weak to show affection. My parents came from a time where everybody was on their toes. Everybody was worried about what's coming next. They grew up in a period where there was a lot of unrest in the country, in Zimbabwe. So showing affection was almost a sign of weakness. You know, you don't kiss somebody, you don't hug somebody in a family. You basically need to be strong. You love each other, but you're not hugging, kissing, and doing multiple things like this. But when I came to Russia, my mindset of how these things worked changed. You see, my parents were trying to raise me to be tough. But when I came here, I realized that I could also be soft. I could hug. I could get a kiss. I could basically go through all of these things. And it was basically a whole different perspective on life for me because Russian families are extremely close. African families are close too, but my parents came from a generation of trying to raise tough kids, which I love them for that because I'm a tough guy. There are very few things that affect me or put me in a situation where I feel like I am annoyed or my back is against the wall. But here, into my adulthood, I kind of got a different perspective on what a family unit is. And it has been absolutely fascinating because I found myself actually becoming slightly softer. I've become a lot softer, and this is because of her family. They get me gifts, they continuously make sure I'm fed, they treat me as if I am extremely special. And I say this multiple times, and my wife would respond, it's because you are. So, putting that into perspective, as somebody who is coming from a foreign land, somebody that is coming into a place that is not their own, they are expecting a lot of things that will make them feel like they need to go home because we always find an excuse to go back home. For the first time in a foreign country, I felt like this is where I'm actually supposed to be, and this is the place that I should be. And they have made it extremely comfortable for me. More comfortable than I feel like a lot of people get the chance to feel. Because when you go to a foreign country, you are basically starting from ground zero. They basically built me up to the point that I skipped many stages and I acclimatized to the place without actually having to acclimatize to the place. They made it extremely easy for me. They were careful with the words. I remember because in Russian, the same word that people classify as a slur, you know, the word that I'm talking about for black people, is the word that they use in Russian to describe a black person. And my mother in law, who is well traveled, she thought that maybe it would be offensive if I even heard this word because it sounds almost exactly the same as a slur because Russian people refer to black people in that way. But there's another word that is an offensive word for black people that I won't say, of course. But anyway, she tried her best to make sure that I didn't hear this word. I was like, hey, look, if it means black person in Russian, I don't really care. Also, that word doesn't really affect me because I don't see it as something that carries weight. So it never offended me. but she was making sure, like, oh, don't say this word around him because he might misinterpret it. Or, if a Russian person says this, don't worry, they're just describing you as a black person. It's not that N word that you think it is, you know? Because there's another word to insult black people with. So, is this care? An extreme amount of care, which was not even necessary, that they sort of had for me. And I continuously every day am surprised. I had my first Men's Day celebration this year, and the number of gifts that I received from them was astronomical. I felt special. And a place that is continuously shunned for being racist, or a place that is continuously shunned for not being accepting, is the opposite of what people say it is. Maybe you have a different experience. Perhaps maybe you have encountered something different. But based on my experience, I feel like all of those things have been proven false, because my Russian family has basically showed me the opposite of what people continuously say Russian people are. And in many regards, I feel like it has inspired me to continue to make content, because I want to share another aspect or another perspective of how kind and lovely the people of this country can and will be to you, as they accept you for who you are. And I never encountered any weird feelings from my family as well. They love her, because my family are basically people that are open to many things, because they accept people and they judge them by their character, not by the color of their skin. And her family is exactly the same. I remember asking her mother whether I wanted to marry her. Sorry. I remember asking her mother if I could marry her, my wife, that is. And her mom said, "Are you sure?" It's a running joke. But instead of asking multiple questions, she just wanted to know if I was sure and I was ready. She didn't care about where I was from, how I looked, what my race was. She just cared if I was ready to make this big step. And our family seemed to get along pretty well. I think as we grow and we have kids of our own, things, of course, will be put into perspective. And I'll be sharing different experiences with you guys. But to put it short, being a black man in a Russian family is amazing. And from my experience, it is exactly the same as being a man in any family. In fact, I feel like it is an amazing experience. If you enjoy the content, please like, subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. As always, we are roaring truths to preserve your pretty voice. Ciao.